Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Dr. Tom Chaney and this is Living Health Live. Joining me on the show as well as in my life and in our practice, Living Health Integrative Medicine, is my wife, Dr. Steph Chaney. We are your trusted source for the latest information to help you get and stay healthy naturally. We're super excited to be joining you regularly to take you on an adventure of a lifetime, your lifetime of great health. You're going to get some great information, strategies, and the latest research on how to live better and have a healthier life. Just remember that this information on the show is intended as educational information only. Information given here is designed to help you make informed decisions about your health. It's not intended as a substitute for medical treatment. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the skinny on fats. So we're going to talk about the definition of fats, the type of fats. We're going to get into the facts about fats. We're going to go through healthy and unhealthy fats. What's a healthy fat? What's an unhealthy fat? How to help you make a better decision. And then the importance of fat in your diet. You know, fat gets a bad name. We're also going to talk about cholesterol. Cholesterol has been talked about as this bad substance. We have these cholesterol lowering drugs. So we're going to kind of demystify cholesterol, what the purpose of cholesterol is in the body, and just help you include more healthy fat in your diet and the importance of doing that. Let's first, Dr. Steph, let's talk about the definitions of fat.
Right. So we can refer to fat by a few different names. So obviously, if we're talking about fat, we could use the term fatty acids. So sometimes you'll hear that's more of in a chemistry kind of sense. And lipids. Lipids are interchangeable with fat or fatty acids.
So let's go through some of the quick facts about fats.
Yes. So about half your calories from childhood up to 18 should be coming from good, healthy fats. So children eat a lot of fat. And the main reason for that is that your brain, the solid matter that makes up the brain itself, is 70% fat. And a child's brain is obviously developing at a very high rate. A lot of nerve expansion, a lot of new cells are being formed. And all the nerves in the body are coated in a lipid protective sheath called the myelin sheath. And every single cell in your body has a membrane that's called a phospholipid membrane. It is mainly a fatty-based membrane made up of all different types of fats, and including saturated. So everybody thinks saturated fats are just this evil fat, but you actually need saturated fat for the body and the cell membrane to have some structure to it. Fat on your food, especially vegetables, you end up actually digesting and absorbing about 30% more vitamins and minerals from your vegetables when you eat them with fat. So when you think of having a salad, you think of having an oil-based vinaigrette. You have a pile of steamed vegetables. You might want to put on some melted coconut oil or ghee or an olive oil dressing. You don't want to be low fat, no fat when you're eating your leafy greens, for example. And the saturated fat that makes up our adipose tissue when we're packing on pounds, most of that actually comes in the form of glycerin, triglyceride, which is basically coming from sugar. So actually, eating and consuming a high carbohydrate, high sugar diet will cause fat gain, not eating a higher fat diet, or at least getting a good amount of your portions of calories from fat. Your nerves, because of that protective fatty myelin sheath, are able to conduct impulses of up to 270 miles per hour because the fat actually is a conductance insulator. So it helps that charge run down the nerve faster. Without it, you can't transmit signals and the nerves actually die. So our patients that have neuropathy, regardless of what the cause is, half of the cases of neuropathy are because of diabetes, but there's chemotherapy, there's autoimmunity where your immune system is attacking the myelin. It's a destruction of the myelin and that protective coating. If it's destroyed and disintegrated, you have raw nerves that will die. So that's a very important thing that we need fat for.
So fat's very important for all of us, but especially if you've got a neurodegenerative condition or you've got neuropathy, you've been diagnosed with neuropathy,
Brain function,
brain fog. Absolutely.
Yep.
So we were talking about the membranes and saturated fat in the cell membrane.
Yep. So this is, you guys remember this sort of schematic of a cell from biology class, and every organelle, so you get these little bits and pieces in the cell, all of those things, mitochondria, they all have a lipid membrane. And the protective coating, the membrane around the cell, is primarily fat. And that's what keeps its shape. It's what protects the inside from the outside. Water and oil don't mix, right? So all that stuff floating around in blood and lymph and outside the cell water basically can't just come in without being invited in. And so that's like the cell's skin, and it's mostly fat, including saturated.
So let's define saturated. You just mentioned saturated fat. Saturated versus unsaturated. What are the differences?
Yeah, so unsaturated. So a fatty acid, a fat, it's a chain of carbons. So you guys remember from, again, going back to biology, chemistry, carbon is represented as a C, and a whole chain of carbons is the base of a fat. If all of the potential bonding sites or binding sites for carbon are full, then you have a fully saturated fat, and the carbons will be bound to hydrogens. So you've got like a C with a bunch of H's around it, right? If all of the saturation points are filled with hydrogen, then it's a saturated fat. And when it's in that state, it's harder, much more solid at room temperature fat. So when you think of saturated fats that are solid at room temperature, butter, coconut oil, lard, Crisco, like certain hydrogenated fats. And then unsaturated means that the sites are not all taken up. There's empty seats for hydrogens. And so it creates this fluid molecule that's in flux, right? And so you think of them as being more liquid at room temperature. So most of your oils. So you've got mono unsaturated and poly unsaturated. And this is just denoting mono means one, poly means many. How many hydrogen sites are not filled? So empty seats on the bus, if you will. And the balance between these different types of unsaturated fats is very important for our overall health. And a combination of all of these is what actually makes up the cell membranes and the tissues in the body. Most mono unsaturated and polyunsaturated come from a lot of like seeds, vegetables. They're more plant derived. And then most of the saturated, I say most, you've obviously got omega-3 fats that are high in animals also based on what they're eating, right? And then saturated fats are very readily found in animal meats, and the components or the amount or the ratio is obviously determined by what the animal's eating. There are some saturated fats in plants and seeds. For example, we talked about coconut oil. It's a high saturated fat. And then there are man-made saturated fats, and these are known as hydrogenated or trans fatty acids. And this is where we take like a plant-based unsaturated fat and chemically, mechanically force hydrogens onto it. So we're creating a solid form of that vegetable oil. And food manufacturers will do that in order to make things more shelf stable. Things don't go rancid as quick. They stay solid and in form, so they're less oily at room temperature, whatever the processed food is that they're putting this into. But ultimately, these are quite toxic, and it's important to be able to spot where they're coming from.
Now let's define essential versus non-essential fats.
And this non-essential versus essential is a term that can be used for anything: vitamins, minerals, fats, amino acids, proteins. So non-essential are made in the body. So it's not essential that you have to eat them to get them, right? For example, you might have a long chain of carbon type of fat, and the body will break it down into smaller, shorter chained fat compounds. And so those shorter chained would be considered non-essential fats. And then essential fats are fats that you have to consume, and the body needs them. So it's essential that the body gets them, and you have to consume them because the body cannot make them on their own. So you must eat them. Same thing with vitamins, right? So essential vitamin, for example, vitamin C. It's generally understood that most people do not make vitamin C. There's obviously some rare instances with certain supplementation that will help the body do that. But overall, it's understood that vitamin C is an essential vitamin. We need to get it in our diet in order to maintain optimal levels of it, because generally the body does not make it on its own.
Okay, so non-essential, you got to get it externally. Essential, we're making it. Good. All right, so let's talk about man-made saturated fats.
So I alluded to those. Yeah, so hydrogenated. So they're hydrogen, they're stuffing that unsaturated fatty chain with the max amount of hydrogens. So they're filling those seats with all the hydrogens you can put in the fat, or partially hydrogenated. So they're filling some of it. These are also known as trans fatty acids. These actually raise LDL, or the quote unquote bad cholesterol, directly. So the more hydrogenated oils you consume, the higher your LDL. So processed foods that are made with partially hydrogenated or hydrogenated oils, regardless of the type, will be really bad for your cardiovascular system and your cholesterol levels. And these can be found in like baked goods. So there's a lot of bakery items that you just don't see the ingredients. If you just go to the regular grocery store and hit the bakery counter and order cookies, cakes, pies, donuts, they're likely full of hydrogenated oils. And you may not actually see the package ingredients because you're just getting them like deli style, for example. So that's important. A lot of shelf stable things like crackers, cookies that are pretty solid, for example, at room temperature, will likely contain some of these things. So you need to make sure that you're getting foods that are made with zero trans fatty acids, no hydrogenated oils. Furthermore, because these fats, they're used and taken up in the body like a saturated fat, because that's essentially what they are, but they're not a saturated fat that the body can easily use and process through. So it will build up in the body and it will aberrate the balance in the cell membranes and the chemical fluidity of the body. And ultimately, it will cause a decrease in visual acuity in infants that are fed milk that have hydrogenated oils. So we understand that it can affect like small blood vessels, small nerves, things like that. It can leads to low birth weight in human infants, and it worsens diabetes. It increases the blood insulin response to glucose. So it's recognized and used by the body as a saturated fat, but it's used in a different way and not for ideal purpose or function.
So we want to minimize these fats in our diet.
Yes.
Okay.
More. Yeah. They're pretty bad. So these hydrogenated oils will inhibit normal function of all cell membranes. So all cell membranes in the body do not function properly. So now that can lead to things getting in the cell that shouldn't be getting in the cell, things that need to get out of the cell, not being able to get out of the cell. And ultimately that can lead to higher incidence of cancer. So there's definitely an understanding that these are carcinogenic. They also alter the metabolism of chemical carcinogens and medications. So how your body uses things like medication, or how your body is able to process and eliminate chemicals like environmental chemicals, is altered. And so that also leads to a higher incidence of the likelihood of cancer. It inhibits, these fatty acids inhibit proper conversion of your healthy essential omega-3 fatty acids so that the body is not able to use that correctly. Therefore, that will also lead to increased issues with, for example, brain function, nerve function, higher incidence of Alzheimer's, dementia, neuropathy, as well as cardiovascular disease, because we know how important omega-3 is as a natural blood thinner. It will increase free radical formation. These are highly oxidizable, so they become oxidized, they form free radicals, and that's a problem for cancer. And they're also associated with childhood asthma. Again, inflammation. So these are associated with higher incidence of cancer, brain damage, nerve damage, cardiovascular damage, all cell membrane damage. So you name it, not good.
So let's talk about some natural saturated fats.
Right. So here's where saturated fats are necessary. They're needed by the body to, like we said, maintain structure and integrity of all your cell membranes and many tissues in the body. So one healthy saturated fat is coconut oil. Coconut oil has been found to decrease inflammation, and its component fatty acids like lauric acid. This is something that we have in the office. Extracted from coconut oil is the specific fatty acids that are antimicrobial. So they kill Lyme, viruses, bad bacteria, yeast, and fungus. And the beauty of the coconut oil fatty acids, it's very close to mother's milk fatty acids, the lauric acid, and it helps maintain good balance of your flora. So the bacteria, yeast, fungus stays in a good balance. It doesn't kill the good stuff, but it only handles the bad stuff. And so I say watch the source, because you want to make sure it's organic and not hydrogenated. And so it's from a good, clean source. Some people will consume, like I said, the components of coconut oils, ketogenic diets, which are very high fat, 70% fat or more. People will do that for brain, for epilepsy, for losing weight. The various fatty acids have different functions in the body, which is cool. MCT oil is something that people have heard of now. It's pretty mainstream. And these are medium chain triglycerides. So they're, instead of long fatty acid, they're medium. And then there's another source, again, talking about milk fat, right? Ghee, people have heard of that. It's clarified butter, is the pure fat without any of the inflammatory proteins in them. And a lot of patients are able to tolerate that, even if they're reactive to the dairy proteins or milk proteins. But they're a good source of short chain triglycerides, or SCTs. And these are very easily broken down into fuel components for the brain. So the brain likes these short chain fatty acids in addition to glucose for its fuel for running its processes. But essentially, these are all important. And then another source of saturated fat is just animal meat in general. And once again, the healthier the animal, remember we said that high carbohydrate leads, like if you're consuming high carbohydrates, you're going to pack on more adipose saturated storage fat. And animals will do that too. For example, take a cow. If it's grass-fed, grass-finished, it's going to be leaner. It won't have as much saturated fat, and the saturated fat will be healthier. The animal will also be higher in healthy omega-3 fatty acids versus inflammation-causing omega-6 fatty acids. But if you wanted to fatten that cow up before slaughter and marbleize its meat and make it juicy and tender and whatever, then you'll actually have the animal eat a lot of carbohydrates. So they'll grain feed it instead of having it. So corn, for example, and corn will cause an increase in the saturated fatty acids. So essentially it makes a diabetic carcinogenic cow, and it also increases the inflammatory unsaturated fat, which is omega-6. But natural, healthy, saturated fat, like for example, tallow comes from the saturated fat around the kidneys of the beef, and it is a great cooking fat. These are very heat stable. They have high heat tolerance. So duck fat, beef tallow, lard, these are all actually healthy if you get them from healthy animals, grass-fed, clean, antibiotic-free, hormone-free. These are healthier cooking fats than most of the vegetable oils that are on the market. And it's important that we get these because these are anti-cancer fats. They are building blocks for every single cell in the body, as well as your blood vascular system, your arterial walls and whatnot, because they help maintain structure. And this is just a reminder that your beautiful cell membrane is reliant on having a good amount of saturated fat to maintain a balance.
So this is a great chart here. So if you guys are just listening to this, you may want to go to YouTube and bring up this chart, but this goes through the mono and poly unsaturated fats, but it also breaks them down into omega-9, omega-6, and omega-3s. So let's go through this chart and we'll start with the mono omega-9s, the non-essentials.
Yeah, so examples of foods that are high in monounsaturated omega-9 is olive. Once again, source is important, organic, if it's animal, free range, antibiotic free. Macadamia nuts are an excellent source of macadamia nut oil. It's also a good high heat oil that you can cook with. We prefer to cook with macadamia nut oil versus olive oil. We'll save for dressings and applying after cooking. Turkey fat, chicken fat, goose and duck, pork lard. We're not huge advocates for eating a lot of pork. If you're going to eat pork, try to get it from very clean sources. Now, canola oil is a monounsaturated fat, but it's toxic. And we do not promote canola oil. It's from rapeseed, it came primarily out of Canada. And it's used a lot in processed food manufacturing now because it doesn't have a taste. So it doesn't overrun the taste of whatever it's being baked into or cooked into. It has a long shelf life, but it is clot forming even if it's organic. So it's not a healthy oil. And then peanut oil is also monounsaturated. A lot of our patients are not able to tolerate peanut oil. Fried peanut oil has a lot of mold toxins in it because peanut is a moldy crop. So a lot of our mold intolerant patients will have issues with that. So we like to stick with olive oil in dressings. And if you're going to cook with things like macadamia nut oil or like duck fat is a great cooking fat that you can get monounsaturated fats from. Polyunsaturated, so they have multiple sites of unsaturatedness. We've got omega-6 fatty acids and then omega-3 fatty acids. Some omega-6 linolenic acid are essential and healthy. Omega-6 linoleic are also essential. We do need them, but we tend to get way too much compared to the other oils, and this causes a lot of health issues. So corn, cottonseed, soybean, safflower, sunflower. The issues with these is a lot of the times when they're used in cooking, they're either not from organic sources. So 95% of soy and corn in this country is not organic. And then they're often trans or fully hydrogenated. So now you've got an overabundance of omega-6 compared to omega-3 in the food, which causes inflammation and dysregulation of cell membranes. And then on top of that, most of the time it's in some type of partially or fully hydrogenated form, which now makes it carcinogenic and even more inflammation causing. Another source of omega-6 is grain-fed, corn-fed animals. So we want to limit those. The other omega-6 linolenic acid, which we don't get enough of to counter, and you want to promote this more, is blackcurrant, borage oil, and primrose oil. And those can be found just in supplements. These aren't foods that we eat usually on the regular. Although I do have frozen black currants that I will put in my shakes on occasion. And then the omega-3s are broken up by another linolenic, which is flaxseed or linseed oil, and then omega-3 EPA and DHA. These are things that are very important and they are essential. We have to get these in our food. These animals have already taken whatever they eat and broken and refined these down into fats that our brain and our cell membranes need. And we get these from fish, especially the high-fat fish like salmon, mackerel, egg yolks. So we're not proponents of eating egg whites only. We really promote eating the yolk, and grass-fed, grass-finished meats of all kind. And so you can see there the requirements. It's overwhelming for people to try to figure out how to get the minimum grams per day of each fat. So we've created our plate rule, which you can read about in our diabetes reversal book, as well as our gluten book. All of our books talk about our plate rule. And that just gives you like a nice visual ratio of the types, the categories of food you should have on your plate, how to get your oils, what kind of oils to rotate in. So you don't really have to like do all the ingredient math to figure things out. You just go by eye and by a healthy food list.
And then how about supplementation for omega-3? So we do a lot of supplementation.
Yeah, so we do a lot of supplementation because we just don't get enough good quality fish, and it's hard to always be eating grass-fed and things like that, but you will get obviously more if you focus on those foods. So we've got a really good capsule. It's called omega-3 MG. MG is monoglyceride. So it's broken down from triglyceride to monoglyceride. So it's 3 times the amount that gets into the body in terms of the absorption of these healthy fats. And so we have people take just maintenance 1 or 2 of those a day. Therapeutically, we will dose up quite high with some of our diabetics and neuropathy patients to just get that ratio and inflammation down. And then we have liquid emulsified form of it in our Omega Mulse, which is like a lemon custard. And that is for our patients who can't swallow pills and things like that. We are definitely promoting a supplement form of this fat. We also will recommend things like black cumin seed oil and some other things that we have here in the office as well.
So let me ask you this. When our listeners are going out to eat and they're eating at a restaurant, which of these oils do you think are they typically consuming?
Mostly the omega-6 linoleic acid. So they're going to mostly get corn, maybe even canola, because a lot of places are cooking with peanut oil, canola oil, corn, cotton, soy. Salad dressings are usually going to have sunflower, safflower oil. Some of our favorite, more local salad dressings that were being manufactured and sold at Whole Foods, the company got bought and they immediately switched from healthy olive oil to sunflower and safflower oil, which was disappointing. So that happens also. You got to keep up with label reading. But yeah, most of the time you're going to be getting the unhealthy omega-9 and the really unhealthy omega-6. And most of the time it's not going to be organic. There's very few restaurants. There are a few of them that will say that they don't use any seed oils and everything's organic. And so that means you wouldn't get anything on that linoleic side in their cooking.
So you got to think about that. You may be making healthy choices at the restaurant, but you also have to consider what they're putting on the food.
Right. And when you're eating out, you also have to realize that your fish is probably not wild caught unless you're going to a place that promotes that. Your meat, your red meat is likely not grass fed unless you're going to a restaurant that specifically states grass fed. When you're eating out, you just need to start making healthier choices. It's like voting with your pocketbook, they say, right? And so supporting only the places that are going to support good health.
And there are some apps out there that will help you make some choices. They actually screen some of the restaurants to help you understand what they're cooking with. And so if you go on the App Store and just do some searching, I'm sure you can find them. So let's talk about, we went through omega-6s versus omega-3s and how we're getting too much omega-6 in our diet.
Yeah, too much of an essential isn't always good. It's all about the balance, right? So the average American diet is the ideal ratio between omega-3 and omega-6 essential fatty acids is about a 1:1 to 1 omega-3 to up to 3 or 4 omega-6. That's the ideal. And the average American diet is close to 1:40, 1:34 to 40 in terms of the omega-6 being just way too sky high. So too much of an essential thing, too much of a good thing is not a good thing, right? It increases inflammation, cardiovascular damage, clotting. It damages all your cell membranes, so it also contributes to cancer. So if you're eating a diet that's high in hydrogenated omega-6 linoleic fats, you're eating a highly carcinogenic, artery hardening, brain frying food.
All right, let's talk about cholesterol. This is most people are familiar with cholesterol. A lot of patients that come in are on cholesterol lowering medication. So what exactly is cholesterol?
So cholesterol is an extremely important component of our body in so many ways. It's a form of lipid. So when you get your blood work done, it's a lipid panel. They're running your cholesterol levels. It's the main repair substance in the body. It's a basic building block for every single hormone in the body, including a vitamin called vitamin D. In fact, the sun hitting your skin and the cholesterol in your skin is what stimulates the production of vitamin D. But estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, cortisol, they are all coming out of their base building block, which is cholesterol. So that tells you how important cholesterol is. You need cholesterol in order to produce bile, which helps with proper digestion of fats coming in from your food. So there's this whole bile is a biotoxin. Your body's trying to get rid of a lot of waste, but you need that cholesterol as an emulsifier to get good fats in while you're getting rid of toxins. It's a delicate balance, which is quite amazing. The transport system to get fats from your food, liver, and into your brain through the bloodstream safely is cholesterol. So if you were, for example, to consume like a half a cup of some fat and it went right into the bloodstream as fat, you would have an oil slick because oil and water doesn't mix. So cholesterol becomes this emulsifying agent that allows the fat molecules to get protein put on them, to have them be able to be transported as individual molecules through the blood so that you don't have that big glob of oil. So it's a healthy transport system to and from all the organs of the body. There's more cholesterol in lean muscle than in adipose tissue. We don't store cholesterol in our fat. That's where we're shoving triglycerides and carbohydrate in a fat source, right? Most of the cholesterol is actually in your lean muscle. And lean muscle is healthy tissue. It's insulin sensitive tissue. It's where you store glucose for fuel. So that tells you that if there's more cholesterol in lean muscle than adipose tissue, it tells you that this is a vitally important component of the body. So one of the issues when people take a cholesterol lowering medication, there's such a list of issues. Yeah, you're lowering cholesterol, but you're lowering your body's ability to absorb good fats. You're lowering your body's ability to produce and maintain adequate hormone levels, which you need for proper function of every tissue in the body. And you're affecting your body's ability to maintain lean mass and healthy nerve conduction. Oftentimes we see that if you read the side effects of the insert paperwork for the statins, it's muscle cramping, muscle wasting, muscle pain, neuropathy, brain fog. These are huge problems for people. It's not possible to make enough for what we need to function. So the liver and other organs will manufacture it from carbs and fats and protein. So we use all these different components, not just fat, to make various types of cholesterol. Cholesterol is not the cause of heart disease. Sugar, damage to your arteries from inflammation, like causing proteins and sugars and immune activity, are what lead to the issues with cardiovascular disease. Cholesterol gets a bad name because it's the main repair substance. So if you've got damage happening, shredding of your arteries, your body will fill it with this cholesterol to try to heal it. It's like trying to stick gum into like holes to plug the holes. And before the 70s, healthy cholesterol levels in the blood was about 300. And then the statins came on the market, and they will increase their market share by lowering the upper level limit. So it went from like 300 down to 250 to 220. Now the upper limit is 200, but there's doctors out there that will hyper prescribe statins to try to drive cholesterol as low as they can. And we've seen patients coming in with like total cholesterol of 98, which is awful. Your brain's not going to work. You're going to have no stamina. You're not going to be able to build lean mass. It's going to contribute to the worsening of your disease over time.
I think we should do a whole future episode just on cholesterol.
Maybe.
Because we see so many people coming in on the cholesterol-lowering medications, and just better education on what it is. And just as you went through, we can elaborate, but not only go through some of the research and talk about that.
Yeah. And especially because like certain breakdowns, like there's different types of the cholesterol, right? You get a lipid panel, you've got the different types. And the pattern of those is more important, and the ratios of those is more important than the total. But also, whatever's high is an indication of something happening. We read lipid panels way different than, for example, your primary care, who's, oh, you're diabetic. We don't care what your cholesterol is. You're at a higher risk for heart disease. We're going to put you on a statin as part of your medication cocktail, almost like preventative medicine. And then they drive cholesterol sometimes too low, but they're not handling why cholesterol might be high. And so sometimes we see patients on statins and their cholesterol is still crazy high, but it's because they've got thyroid dysfunction or inflammation or an autoimmune condition. And I don't know, they've done studies of nuns, populations of people that have lived into their hundreds with high cholesterol levels in the 300s. You can't just treat based on that, because you could do a lot of harm to that person.
All right, let's go through some of the fatty. We'll wrap it up with fatty vitamins.
Yeah, so you've got different vitamins. You got water soluble vitamins, and then you've got fat, right? These are the fatty ones. And so it's important actually that you're getting oils in your food primarily to support the production of these. So vitamin D, like I said, if you're naked in the sun, we actually produce our own vitamin D. Most people it's just not realistic in modern society. So we actually have to supplement. And vitamin D3 is the ideal form. It's important for bone density, as this helps with the absorption of calcium through the gut, normal mood, brain, and nerve function. I will say, add to this, vitamin D increases insulin sensitivity. So it's very important for diabetics. It's important as an anti-cancer. There's some research that has boldly stated that breast cancer is linked to vitamin D deficiency, prostate cancer, vitamin D deficiency. There's a lot of factors for how vitamin D helps the body. Vitamin K is important alongside vitamin D, as it will help take the calcium that's now brought into the blood and gets it into the bones. So it helps actually keep calcium out of the blood for the purposes of not having calcium build up in your arteries, as well as kidney stones and things like that. So it's very important for K2. That's the form that you want to be introduced with D3. Now, if someone is on a blood thinner like Coumadin, then we have to be cautious about that. Vitamin E is a very important antioxidant. The ideal form for that is what's called mixed tocopherols. So it's like a complement of different forms of vitamin D. And then vitamin A, beta carotene, is the more natural form of that. Very important for nerve, eyes, but also gut lining and gut health. And it's an antioxidant as well. These are the main fatty vitamins that people need to make sure they're getting in their diet.
So if you want high quality vitamins, we vetted all of our vitamins. So we want high quality going into our body. So everything that we promote to our patients, we actually take personally. So livinghealthmarket.com, that's where we have all our supplements.
And to your point, Dr. Tom, so there's a lot of vitamin D supplements out there. Everybody has vitamin D. But the oil-based for D and K is critical. So there's a lot of stuff out there. The label might have a green leaf on it and look like it's super natural, awesome. But we will look at these products and their oil base is corn or soybean oil. So you have an inflammatory fat as the base for the vitamin itself. So the ones that we have here, we vetted from our manufacturers. We only have oil from olives, so olive oil or an MCT coconut oil base. So these are healthier fats. We don't have to worry about inflammation and all the other things.
So once again, it's livinghealthmarket.com. That's where you can find all those products. And then more information on nutrition, check out our books. So our gluten book has a lot of great information in there. We also have Defeat Diabetes, great information in there as well.
And there's just a quick overview, just tying it all together, like really get our books, watch our videos on the plate rule, because we teach a person just how to ratio things by visual. For example, a way to get good, healthy fat balance would be if you follow the plate rule, it's 50 to 75% vegetable on the plate, good quality fatty protein, animal protein, whether it's wild-caught salmon, grass-fed beef, free-range lamb, and then you might cook that food, your vegetables, in tallow, duck fat, coconut oil, macadamia oil, so you're getting extra fats there. You might drizzle olive oil dressing on your vegetables or plop some grass-fed ghee to melt over the vegetables, and maybe you have a little bit of chopped avocado or something like that. So there's ways of getting good fats. When it comes to like high-fat keto, because this is a very popular thing right now, a lot of commercial keto products and keto diets promote way too much consumption of dairy, milk, and unfortunately, it's not feasible. You're not usually getting grass-fed healthy forms of unpasteurized in that regard. But keto is fine for some people, and it's fine for a period of time to be very strictly eating like 70, 80% fat. But so much vitamin and mineral deficiency can occur if you're over consuming fat for too long. So it's great for losing and lowering inflammation for a period of time, but you have to rotate back to just a baseline of plate rule. The plate rule is kind of the baseline. You can do anything extreme for a period of time and get a result, but to maintain ideal health overall, I don't recommend a very strict high-fat keto like forever. And if you are going to do that, you need to supplement because you will be deficient in B vitamins. You will have thyroid gland issues. There will be, over time, different imbalances that you're going to have to take into account.
Awesome. Great information. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Our goal and our purpose in doing this is to educate you so you can make better health decisions. So if you got some beneficial information, please let us know. So leave comments, like and share it with your friends and family. We appreciate it. If you have a topic that you'd like us to cover in a future episode, then you can always send that in, info@mylivinghealth.com. Mylivinghealth.com, that's our website. So if you want to check out our blog, check out our information there. And this has been Living Health Live with Dr. Tom and Dr. Steph Chaney. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.